right, Dom. Well, welcome to the pod.
Hey.
We're going to get into it here. Like I said earlier before we started, I love what you guys are up to at
Thanks, man.
House and what you're running. But the real reason why we're sitting down is I don't know much about you, so we're going to get into you as a person, you as an individual, you as a leader. And I always like to dive in early on with family, mom, dad, strong influences there. What would you say early on in life? And you can start whenever you want to start. What age? I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, what were some strong influences early on in life for you?
Yeah, no, I think so. I'm the youngest of 4 boys, 2 from my mother's womb, but my cousins became my brothers fast, probably in my teens.
Okay,
their teens, my teens. But I think if I had to pinpoint just a couple of things like early influences, mom and dad first. I think my dad being in the military allowed us to see the world in a way that we probably wouldn't have. And I think that's just
via traveling?
Via travel, via conversation, because you can travel to a place and still stay in your house, right? And so the exposure to different cultures that honestly I think broadened my perspective of like humanity, how I see people, what lens I look with when I talk to them. Put that on vibrate. And I think, most of the things that's shaped like a good majority of how I approach life really came from being a military brat.
So as a military kiddo, growing up, I'm assuming...
I also never heard military kiddo before. I'm going to tell my military brat friends that.
Don't say that.
We got a new term, y'all,
like,
military kiddo.
As a kid, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming a very structured household. Your dad was... You're laughing, so that's maybe not the case here. But when I think of military, I think of a very... more of a hard-nosed type of leadership approach.
You think about G.I. Joe, Major Payne.
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
All the...
stereotypical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Look, I think growing up in a military base, particularly the base that I'm referencing is like in Saudi Arabia. It was, I think, what was Opium Saying. And I think the most interesting thing about that base is that there's structure all around you and like, you got fences and all this other stuff that keep you in the base, but there's just so much freedom in the base, right? So kids would always be outside running around, having fun. Was there structure? Yes. Like, I probably have chuckled and laughed at my friends about this. Like, I don't. That whole spare the rod, spoil the child. My parents heeded that old adage in the Bible. Like, it was just like, okay, I was the one who was always pushing limits and boundaries. So I think while there was structure, it never felt caged in. So I think that was something that was helpful. And I don't know, I think, do we have to wake up early? Yes. Like, that happens. But if I'm now in my, mid-late 30s here, I'm grateful for that experience. Now, when you're an adult, you can kind of see how things pan out. But there was a bit of structure. I'm just laughing in my mind because I'm like seeing all the visual imagery now, and I'm like, yeah, there was structure, but I was a pretty active kid. Like, I was...
Give me some examples of that.
Yeah, one story was... Okay, it's like bending the rules, right? And I think everybody's done this. So we go visit another friend's family in Bahrain.
Okay.
I think it was in Bahrain.
So not on the base? Or
so it's another base.
Okay, from
it's
base
another
to base.
U.S. military base, but it's not the base that I stayed on. So we go visit them, and now we're on their base. And so, of course, like, parents, like you ask your mom, so we asked our mothers, could we go outside and ride bikes?
Okay.
They say no. Somehow I think we go out and ask our dads. They said yes. So like we go outside and we ride our bikes. My dumb behind, I was over here trying to do backflips off of a speed bump ramp on a bike. and literally busted my. I can do this now because of that situation.
That's hilarious.
So it's just like there was structure, but there was always ways to like push the limits, push the boundaries. It wasn't. Oftentimes, I think when people think about structure, they think about these rigid, unmovable, unbendable, like spaces.
Sure.
It just didn't feel like that. You know?
Yeah.
Like, it just didn't feel like that.
Yeah. And you're not only talking about physically, you're also talking about maybe even within the supervision of your mom and your father.
Like there was definitely plenty of supervision. I'm not going to doubt that. There was definitely instruction. I'm not going to doubt that at all. But it never felt like it came from a place of like dispelling.
Okay.
You know, sometimes like in work environments, you have like your leader sometimes will delegate.
Okay.
Sometimes delegate can feel like dispelling someone away from your presence, right? It never felt like that with them, right? So I think because of those, it always came from a place of love. It always came from a place of care. It didn't feel like it was coming at me to harm me.
Got it. Got it.
That way, yeah.
What if you were to pick one thing, let's say that your dad or your mom instilled in you during that time, maybe like that you still, whether it could be a habit, it could be a way of thinking. What things are you tapping back into? Is there an early, maybe instructional thing or leadership thing?
I think there's a couple of things. There's one is on like a global front. You know, I think in the early 90s, America depicted Africa through media as like just feed the children, right? Like that was the only visual representation that you saw in the early 90s of Africa. When my father was adamant about us traveling all throughout the country, or the continent rather, to see the other countries there, you quickly learn that that is not the case.
Sure.
Are there pockets? Yes, right? But if you think about the population of Nigeria, it rivals the population of America, right? So I think one, that global aspect, and we lived in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So being able to, like my dad was on assignment. So if I had to, sometimes the family would have to go because that's culture. So we go and now we're sitting down at a leader who's connected to the prince, who's connected to the, you know, the royal family. Just a lot of like, and the way that they're living is just like, golly, like this is plush, right? So you go and you sit down and you engage in the cultural activities. Even as a kid, you don't know what you're doing. But I think those things help me continue to keep a lens that's like global. I think it's influenced me learning languages in the summer. It's influenced how I look at diversity, which is experience, expertise, and ethnicity, right? How we build our team, right? Like a lot of those things. That's helped out a lot. I would also say faith. My parents are big people of faith. I'm a big person of faith. And I think what they never really gave me was the dogma of religion, but the spirituality of belief. And
let's dive into that a little bit. Yeah,
sure.
Let's unpack that. That's good.
Sometimes religion will just teach you belief, right? Like as a Christian, it's like, oh, I need to have a belief of God, and you have a belief of Jesus. But you can have that belief, but the question is, do you believe? Like, what does the daily practice look like? Not just in like the communication, but also in the practice of like love, long-suffering, patience. Like, how do you then take those ideals, almost like expand them, so therefore they can like bleed into a lot of your practice of how you work with your colleagues, how you lead, you know, just those things. So I think those things were pretty impactful. And then I would also say, last but not least, man, just like family and friends. And my dad he walked by a code. My mom walked by a code. And I think they did a great job of sharing that with us, but never dictating what direction that, you know, we went. I remember there was one time when my dad attempted to do that, and that was when I was in undergrad. And my dad, some of his some of his focus in the military, some of it I don't know, some of it I do know. On the health med side, I knew. But I think there was a space that he wanted to go in the healthcare field. And I ended up studying, I was trying to choose my major before I went in. And he was trying to push me in this direction of physical therapy. And I was just like, that's not what I wanted. That's what you wanted to do. Like, I never wanted to do that. And so I ended up doing healthcare management instead. But, you know, it was just things like that. So I think the recognition and the freedom to have that conversation in respect,
sure,
knowing that the exploration was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier that kind of a bit of a wild child, kind of pushing the limits.
Yeah.
I find that some of the best entrepreneurs are those people, right? Because a
I don't
lot
know,
of
man. We
times
may
they
be
don't
crazy.
take no for an answer. Like,
Yeah.
you go to your mom, no, okay, I'm gonna figure out another way. I'm gonna go to Pops or whatever. So how is that lended? Is there a moment, or maybe several moments, or just the way you live life now, that you're saying, you know, me as a wild child was the recipe to where I'm at today because of taking maybe more risks or whatever the case may be?
Look, man, I think hindsight is always like 20/20.
Sure.
You know, it's easy to look back and say, and I think oftentimes because as humans we're so infatuated with being able to codify our experiences and having the desire to like communicate that effectively so that we're understood, we felt that we heard. Look, I think, is that in the bowl of soup? Sure. I don't think it's devoid of the entrepreneurial experience. I think those experiences of being the baby in my family, always testing limits, it's added to like my toolkit now, right? And so I think it helps, but I wouldn't say it's the only thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I found something. So I've spent a bit of my years, 3 years to be exact, overseas. In South Korea.
South Korea.
And me and my wife had just gotten married, and it was just kind of a time for us to kind of figure each other out in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And through my experience, it was wild because I was brought up in a very rigid Christian household.
Yeah.
And there was a certain set of beliefs. There was a certain set of what you do and what you don't do.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because whenever we went overseas, we were in this expat community.
Yeah.
From Norwegians to just all these different
people who look differently, think differently, believe differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it really resonated with me whenever you were talking about like the difference between more of like this religion thought process or the way you believe to I just feel like there's a set of rules that this Bible Belt community really lives by.
Yeah.
And then you go outside of the States, let's say, into other communities. And there's really good people that believe the same things. But your eyes are kind of open to more of the world or outside of this little bubble that we call the Bible Belt or Tulsa, Oklahoma, or whatever.
Exactly.
So anyways, that was very interesting. You had mentioned, and I just wanted to say that I thought that was super cool.
No, it's important.
Language.
Yeah.
You said in the summers you're learning. How many different languages do you know right now, and what are you striving towards?
I have 2, man. I need to get to 5.
Okay. Just a personal goal of yours?
It's shaped in a lot of ways what I believe like innovation as a tool, like what it can do. You know, oftentimes in a lot of the work we do in innovation, tech, product development, you know, team matching, team design, whatever, there's a lot of tools that teach you to empathize, to teach you to connect, and most of it in the teaching is done in instruction to the customer, right? Like, how do we take these practices and bring them to the customer? Well, how can you take these practices and bring them to your colleague, right? To your comrade, to honestly, even like the people that you have conflict with. And so I think for me, it's now learning languages has shaped, I think a bit of my context as a leader now. It's like, you know, you start off as founder, then you start to bridge into the CEO role, and it's like, okay, executive functions, I got to build a new tool set. So I think now as we think about our ACT model, architects, creatives, and techies, and think about how that communicates in this context within the U.S. as far as the innovation economies here, how does that communicate here comparatively to London, comparatively to Chile, comparatively to the Middle East, right? If, like, let's take Dubai or some of the Arab countries. If you look at what's happening in those regions, there's a huge push on innovation. There's a huge push on economies right now, and a huge push on ecosystems, right? The question is, do the tools that have worked here actually work there? And are they culturally relevant to the lived experience of the people there? So someone may have an idea, may be an innovator, and we may not be communicating in a way that brings them into the mix. And so now either that's talent that's now been improperly placed in some company because they needed some security, or it's a dream that's on its way to the grave, right?
Sure.
And so the question is, like, how do we mitigate the number of dreams that go to the grave? And how does culture inform what we do and how we do it in order to actually get it to those spaces, right? So I think it's learning languages has helped in that. Middlebury College is, I mean, listen, go if you have a chance. You sign a pledge to only speak the language that you're learning for like 7 to 8 weeks. I was supposed to get there last summer. I didn't get there last summer. But it's always on my list every year to do.
I'm assuming it's a physical location, like a college.
Yeah, Middlebury College. It's in Vermont.
Okay.
Yeah, the summers are great.
And they're dedicated to language.
Yeah, so imagine
give me more here. This is the first time I hear about it.
It's like Hogwarts, right? Just like on a university campus. I mean, that's what Hogwarts kind of mirrored. It's
sure.
It's depictions from. Like, there's a college and school for arts and sciences. There's a college and school for, I don't know, business, right? There's a school of engineering, whatever it may be. So, like, instead of just engineering, business, art, social sciences, it's like Russian, Mandarin, Spanish, Portuguese, Hebrew,
and is this just
Arabic.
the summer program, or is it year round?
It's in the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're locked in. I love it because
that's super cool.
It's like it's what I have designed as to be my executive break and education since 2015, 2016. The first time I went was 2016. I went for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I remember I was leaving Booz Allen, and I was sitting still. Like, I had a little room to just sit still for like 2 months, if that. But I was already doing some deeper inner work around, like, what is my divine work? Like, as in, like, if I don't have a job, what is the work that I've been created to do on this earth? And I think if that helped me looking at the question that way, because then now I'm doing more of a vertical, download than I am just looking horizontally at the market and thinking about what job I need to get. And so after doing that and writing and writing, I think oftentimes people have the answers, they're just not writing the stuff down. And what happened was I knew that my work was in the realm of facilitation. Strategy, I knew that was a gift. I knew, like, and facilitation for me was like user experience. It's just a medium. It's a tool of connecting the dots from one experience to another, to one screen to another. Programmatically, there's a user experience, right? So I knew that I had a realm in there. And if I look back at my my family, rest in peace to my great Uncle Eddie, who literally just passed away like 2 months ago. He was a big time teacher, superintendent. Like, everybody, like, the teaching gene came from Uncle Eddie and his squad. So anyways, I knew those things were real. So now as I started to think about, and there was more in that.
Sure.
But now as I think about that, okay, what job do I want to be on? Because that's just a platform, right? It's the platform for you to exhibit your gifts, exhibit your skills, and do your thing that way. So I think that was key. I saw a role in Tallahassee, Florida as director of incubation programs, or really it was like program manager for the incubator. And I was like, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. I didn't care about the title, but I was like, I'm going to be working with artists pretty much artists and entrepreneurs. I knew that was my tribe. I'm running a cohort, and it was early stage founders. So in my deal that we did, I said, hey, look, this is going to be a part of my life, like Middlebury, until I decide to stop. I'm going in the summer. You can choose to 1099 me or W-2 me, but I'm going in the summer. Yeah. If you believe that W-2ing me will prohibit me from going, then I will quit. Like in that time, I'll build value and I'll quit. And we decided on a W-2. I said, look, I'll translate, but I'm off.
Right.
And they allowed it, and I busted my butt, right? Like I knew what type of value and outcomes I need to drive. And Lucas Lindsay, who was the executive director at the time, we had a good 1-2 collaboration, right? He'll handle the board and the donors, right? And more like the partnerships. I'll make sure that we have pristine programs and great outcomes, right? And so we just tag teamed on that, right? Work strategy in the back end, go in our lanes, create, make things happen. So I think that was the energy that we had, and we made it happen. But yeah, it was 3 weeks in 2016, 5 weeks in 2017, and then I did a full program in 2018. 2019, I think I skipped. Pandemic was 2020.
Sure.
21, I moved to Tulsa. We just kicked off the accelerator, and so I didn't go then. But 22, I went back, did Arabic. So I did Hebrew first, then I did Arabic.
And are you with a big crew of students?
Dude, it's like 80, 140 people there.
And that's in just the one language?
Yeah, so there's like level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Sure.
So I just started from the bottom, literally. And
was it the same language as you kept on going year over year just to keep up? Or
2 or 3 summers. And that one it was easier for me to pick up because my built environment in Tallahassee, like my co-founder of Act House initially was Ido David. And Ido, who lives in Israel right now, we were like thick as thieves. So we were 1 and 2. He had just moved to Tallahassee. There was a very like divine sprinkle of moments, right? Like he saw himself as a facilitator. I saw myself as a facilitator. His facilitation was different from mine. There was a brotherhood and collaboration that was just always present.
Yeah.
Shared values.
Yeah.
It was just very, 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 very unique and cool. And so I had already went to Middlebury 2 summers. So I came back. So that was a 3 week and a 5 week. So really I did 1 summer because that's the combination of the two.
It.
Long story short, everybody was circling his name around the ecosystem. I looked at his name. Everybody's calling him David. And I'm like, no, this dude is Israeli. So I literally sent him a message, typed it in Hebrew. And I think I had just signed up for LinkedIn Premium, like in a trial.
Okay.
So of course, like with LinkedIn Premium, people look on your account, you see the notifications and all that stuff.
Right.
So I saw him go on my account, my profile, and I know in his mind he was like, yo, who is this black dude in Tallahassee, Florida, like speaking Hebrew?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And we just connected from there, met at a coffee shop, and then kept working, man.
Dude, that's awesome, bro.
Yeah.
Language is always something. I want to stay here for a little bit longer. I feel like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's something that you're either gifted with or you're not.
I disagree.
Okay, I would love to hear that.
Yeah.
For me, it did not come easy, has not come easy.
Yeah.
So when I lived overseas for 3 years, because I was in the environment, sure, you grasp it. It's something that you go to the market, you go wherever, you have to, like, there's no choice at that point in time. And maybe it's lack of commitment, to be honest with you. But I think that, for instance, my wife, she was able to pick it up and be more fluent very quickly. Whereas me, we were on this kind of the same trajectory as far as education, as far as like effort. Yeah. And I was like 1/3 of where she was at. Yeah. It just didn't come. So if you say disagree, why would you say disagree? And was it just lack of, just dive in there.
Yeah, the metrics of measurement are not the same.
Okay.
Right? Like language learning is genuinely about like being open and asking questions nonstop, right? So what your wife probably had a good gene of doing is like asking questions nonstop and being very comfortable with being dumb, right? if you're not comfortable with being dumb, like for a moment, you'll never pick up a language.
Is that I don't know type of verbiage? Like when you're saying, or like being dumb.
I think it's mindset.
Okay.
Right? Like, hey, I don't know what this. It's like if we're having a conversation.
Okay.
You drop a word.
Okay.
I don't know what the word means, but I'm like,
Okay. Okay.
And that happens a lot, like in our language and dialogue at work, whatever, right? And so you have to be comfortable with raising your hand and saying, hey, I don't know what that is. Right? Like, hey, could you explain that to me?
Got it.
What is this? Right? It's those small, soft tissue elements that help. Second, I think you have to understand how you learn. We haven't had that many deep conversations yet. But I think what I can deduce from you is that there's a level of, you need the structure. It needs to be intense from a focus standpoint, but you still need to have the freedom to be able to flow, right? Generally going to the host country where the language is spoken, unless you are truly in an environment there where they only talk to you in the language and it's nonstop, you will always revert back to the familiar. It gives you an opportunity.
Sure.
So it gives you the opportunity to go be smart again, right? Because internally I'm feeling weak, I'm
defeated almost.
Yep. I'm feeling like unaccomplished, right? So, and I remember that, man. I remember it was crazy. I signed like my first 3 days, and I signed the language pledge, and the only thing it says, for sure team, right, or shalom. I'm dropping hella basic words, man. And
I don't know anything else.
Yeah, AFO is like where, sure team is like restroom. So that's all I got. And I'm going in level 1, and so go to class, and Guy and Tibby, who actually teaches at Ard'is. I think he used to teach at Ard'is. I told him when I get rich, I'll buy him his 63 Corvette.
Okay.
I haven't forgotten.
Okay.
So interestingly enough, amazing professor, amazing facilitator, amazing educator. He had the awareness to see me on my 3rd day, and he pulled me to the side after class. It's a common thing with like the professors at Middlebury, and I'm starting so we took Hafsakah, which is like a break, and he's like, yo, Gabriel, like, I'm recognizing that your energy, right, is low. So like we're talking in like Hebrew and English, and I'm picking up what he's saying, and then he starts speaking more English, and I was just like, man, I feel defeated because it's the most humbling experience.
Sure.
So I think like experiences like that now translate. Okay, now if a customer tells you, hey, this isn't working, or you're gathering feedback, I now know how to just be, not only because of that experience, but how that experience layers into like the work, right? Whether it's design thinking, user experience architecture, all those things, it layers back in to now understand that the feedback is not at me. Like it's not personal.
Sure.
Right? So now how do I just like drop that to the side, pick up what's necessary so I can just grow?
Right.
But I think oftentimes the way that we are orientated in society generally leads us to worry about our stature than the stewardship of our own knowledge, right? We're so big on stewarding our own personalities and identities more than we are on the knowledge and the growth and lessons that we learn. And that's really just the art of like,
that's really
how do you get
good.
2% better? Yeah. That's it,
Dude, and it was such a valuable tool, kind of being in that place in a language type of situation, now being able to take that into what you're doing.
It's huge. It's helpful.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
I kind of want to move in more of that direction of what you're doing today. You had said in 21 you moved to Tulsa.
Yeah, man.
Why did you move here? Was the intent to get something started? Was the intent? It was already why?
I think somebody
Tulsa?
laced something in my drink. To be honest with you, man. My first experience with Tulsa was actually 2001.
Okay.
My brother just graduated from high school, and our family, he attended ORU.
Okay.
So our family made the 15-hour drive from Tallahassee, Florida, to Tulsa to drop off his stuff and drop him off as well. And I remember.
So he was going into freshman year
of college.
Okay.
I'm going to my freshman year of high school. He's going to his freshman year of college. And, the moments that your big brother leaves, you cry, all that good stuff. So then I come back to high school. I didn't know 20 years later that I would move to Tulsa. When you think about that, right? It's a very interesting experience. And it's almost like he had to come lay down the groundwork and then I could come, you know? But, you know, we were at a very interesting juncture point in our company. Acthouse was always focused on co-living models, right? And really like a residential incubator. I'd done enough main stage incubators and accelerators where, in leading them, directing them, designing them, where I started to just recognize the problem. We're trying to address a person as a founder and not as a human. And when you can start to actually think about this from like a human-centered design approach, you can find a lot. So what does a founder need? Well, a founder, if we back up, is a person who has an idea, all right? So they have an idea. They have enough personality to like become insatiable about this idea.
Sure.
Right? Sure. So now in order to create room to execute on this idea, all right, I now need tools, resources, and space, okay? I also need to make sure that I can pay my bills because now I've become older. So now I've accumulated things, right? Yeah. And now I have to take care of some stuff, right? So interestingly enough, what we recognize is that, okay, burn rate of the individual, individual human, and mentorship and guidance or tools, those two things are areas that we need to address. So that's why we did a residential incubator. So that was key. Then also team was key. I started to notice all of our, I'll give you an example. Before I went to Domi Station, they had 53 startups. One was still in business. And it was doing extremely, extremely well. So it's kind of like, oh, the one hit.
Sure.
But like 1 out of 53, like, wow, that's egregious.
Yeah.
So we redesigned the programmatics, which actually kind of mirrors.
Where were the failure rates? Let's go. I love hearing about that.
Look,
why were there so many different ones failing?
I think when there's layers.
Sure.
One, I think there's at the early stage, if you have programmatics that are designed to just get you to demo day, it's unsuccessful. Like it doesn't transform you. Like you're going to create something that you have never seen before and that you've never been prepared for. Do you think that 9 weeks or 10 weeks is gonna
Sure, I get it.
For an hour and a half on a Tuesday night.
Right.
And some mentors who like want to chat with you, but not really.
Right.
Like it's not like you're their child or something, or their flesh and blood.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, they care about their community, but hey, if it comes down to it, your time will be sacrificed to that mentor, right? So that's another factor. Team, right? Like the aspect that we figured out, or what I figured out was, okay, I now have to pay out third-party vendors in order to build product for a non-technical co-founder, to build product or design product.
Okay.
For a technical co-founder, I have to build the product because I have the skills, or go learn skills, or go team up, find a designer, which is maybe third party, and also find a business co-founder because I don't know that landscape, so now I can't trust. So team was a big factor that always led to it as well, right? I think 67% of VC or fund managers blame team as the reason why, like the failed fund.
Yeah.
The fund failed.
Because of lack of team or the wrong team members?
The lack of team in the startups.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Lack of team, sometimes wrong team members, team composition, all those things. So in noticing those things, I said, okay, well, team is the aspect that we got to look at. So I think that's why when we started Acthouse and we tested out that team model as far as architects, creatives, and techies, that came from our first startup in 2012. And we failed in 2014. I wrote a post-mortem report of the top 3 things that I learned. And those 3 things are literally being implemented in Acthouse today. And the third one is the team model, all about team design. And so architects, creatives, and techies. So when we had our first house, it was 3 bedrooms, 3 baths. It was a house I bought in 2015. And I was like, okay, well, I have the house. I was talking to a mentor of mine. He's like, this is a darn good idea, Dominic. I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah. He said, what do you need? I said, well, I have the house. He said, okay, good. What's next? And I said, well, I can develop this pitch deck and pitch it to the university. So I did that. And we probably started that program with like $20,000. The rent was free and all that stuff. But our trajectory was we were a co-living company. Scaled it to about 54 beds, had 16 that had signed up, like start date's August. 16 signups already as far as signed contracts.
Sure.
In January, right? This is 2020. Now we're in Atlanta doing Techstars. And interesting enough, we were like about to sign up with another developer, like 236 or 63, my dyslexia. What's the numbers thing when you switch the numbers?
Dyslexia.
Yeah. Sometimes it creeps up. But I think I'll say 236.
Okay.
Well, I'll be conservative.
Sure.
Why not? We were signing up with a new developer for that. And then the pandemic hit. I was like, fudge.
Yeah.
So like now we have to like communicate all this stuff out, unwind certain positions, make sure we don't go bankrupt, all these things.
Yeah.
So I think we were at a juncture point, man, where we had taken, like, what's the best part that we do? Programmatics. Doesn't have to live in the house, right?
Sure.
Is it ideal? I think it is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to. So we took the best parts, team model design, the 6-month incubation structure that I created at Domi Station, the connectivity that we created and the collision points that we created within the co-living environment, and rolled it up into what's literally been rocking as a node in the ecosystem in Tulsa for the past 3 years. And so when you think about that and then understand the power of collaboration, you get a chance to, okay, see how this stuff can really work together. But I think when we decided to move here, I think we did a good job of studying the landscape, studying what were people saying on the ground. It's easy to think about what the top layer is saying, right?
Sure.
Government, nonprofits, philanthropies, corporations. It's easy,
Sure.
right?
Those are the headlines, yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But the ideas are with the people and the people in the streets.
In the dirt, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
so like that's where we went.
Yeah.
So we understood the landscape enough to say, okay, hey, we have something that could work here. And at the time we had partnered with I2E, and they have, of course, the longest standing venture capital firm in Oklahoma. They were at a juncture where they wanted to shift and change their thinking up. So we had a lot of talks on that. And we just jointly raised the fund. Like, we had no money, they had no money. And so we said, well, let's jointly raise this fund. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
And thankful to be able to work with some amazing partners in that. And that's what got us here.
So some of the biggest questions I have around, by the way, you guys are doing amazing work.
Thanks, dude.
As far as boots on the ground in the dirt, I hear always good things. Programmatically, I mean, you guys are a rock star team in a lot of ways.
Appreciate it.
One of the most interesting things that I find, I don't want to say confusing or problematic, but something I've always found interesting is organizations like yourself.
Yep.
At the end of the day, you need capital.
Yeah.
And going to these people, organizations, whatever,
Yep.
and literally selling yourself.
Yep.
Did that come easy? Is that hard? Is that a skill set that you've learned over the year? Like, give me a little bit more, because you need backers to do what you do.
I think oftentimes, like of our product, like the accelerator is the one that I think catches the most, the quote unquote headlines.
Okay.
And is the shiniest thing.
Okay.
And is the only thing within our like product line, so accelerator, pre-accelerator assessment,
Yep.
that actually requires us to raise capital. Do I like it? I think like I like the partners that we have and that we've collaborated with. I think the aspect of going to raise money, if I had a choice, like I'm a founder through and through,
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
if I had a choice. And even a lot of our new strategy and focus is, okay, hey, our pre-accelerator, which is a 24-hour innovation boot camp, or our 6 to 8 week kind of pre-accelerator, is like doing well. So it's a revenue driver for us. But that pre-accelerator and accelerators all served as great research on the assessment side, right? So to design an assessment that helps people understand their innovation mindset, team harmony, their skill archetype.
Sure. Yeah.
We collect roughly about 43 data points with that one assessment, and that's excluding demographic data. There's roughly about 8,417 ways that you could show up on it. There's roughly about 29.3 billion possible team formations we can create from it.
That's
and
crazy.
We haven't even
Yeah.
incorporated industry data
Yeah.
and thinking about the data points and the matches we can create. I think the most interesting thing that we have found is that And what we're thinking through is, how do we focus our energy and efforts on the expansion of that side of the business, which has been a large part of our focus this year, to be able to fund it off the balance sheet, right? Like, that's the energy that I like to have. I think also too, it's easier to come to, even if you have results, right? I'll give an example. Raise a $5 million fund, 43 investments. The fund is performing at 26% right now. How do you calculate that? Well, what are the returns back into the fund?
Sure.
Ours is a 1x return. We've had 13 companies trigger their 1x return back into the fund, right? I think 50% of those have paid it out fully.
Oh, wow.
The others are paying it out.
Yeah,
over
that's
time.
awesome. Yeah.
When you think about those numbers, and most even VC funds are performing about like 13 to like 16% nationally. The ones that are at the top are like at this 19, 21.
Got it.
Okay. The reality is, even with those numbers and even with the focus that we have, you find yourself less likely to find people or organizations that are still willing to lead. Right? There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But it's a signal to me, just like thinking about, okay, pattern recognition. All right, well, great. You have a problem leading. Great. We're not going to deviate from our work. Even if you look at a lot of there was a collage of all of our founders. Even though our focus is to invest in the underinvested and to accelerate equity and liquidity moments within, for those individuals, because the research that we have from McKinsey, Kaufman, the likes, knows that they're going to take money and run it back to their community, right? Even in that research, right? Like, we know that is a way for us to add value and address the 2% gap that goes to Black and Latino-led startups, right?
Yeah.
And VC funding. And so we're not going to deviate from the work. So then how do we continue it in the way that we want to? Fund it off the balance sheet. Like, grow the revenue. And then if I knock on your door and say, hey, I have 500,000 or $1 million that I'm putting towards this, would you like to play ball?
Right.
It's an easier conversation.
Sure.
Because the conversation is, we've never wanted to look at our partners as, I don't know, just money.
Yeah. Sure.
Like, the money's cool.
Sure.
But like, there's people that we've turned away from the fund. Like, I remember.
Do they come in with the guardrails of like, oh, this
Some people do.
Yeah.
They try to. Like, everybody has goals.
Sure.
Do the goals align? Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And so if they don't, then you know how to tactfully have that conversation. If they do, now it's like, okay, the goals may align, but is there autonomy in the implementation? For me, I always look for creative control. Not because, like, it's not about power.
Okay.
For me in that respect. It's more so about the ability to articulate and fundamentally shift the user experience for the end participant in order to get the outsized returns and impact that we need. I'm not letting up on that at all.
And you shown it, yeah.
No, not at all,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because I know at the end of the day, I know what I'm doing in this world.
Sure.
And I know what I possess, right?
Yep.
I have the humility to be confident in what I know and to be confident in what I don't know. Like, I'm not going to be scared, like those small questions
Sure.
about learning the language. I'm not, hey, I don't know that. Could you break that down for me?
love
Like,
that.
You know,
Yeah,
so I think
yeah.
there's that aspect, and I know that there's other providers in this space that are just not going to ask that question.
Sure.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But that's why that creative autonomy, you're talking about the guardrail, it's a
Yeah,
requirement.
yeah.
It's just a requirement.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you knocked on our door because you actually like the impact and the results.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Our team stretches ourselves and challenges ourselves in so many ways from a leadership perspective in order to get these results. Like, we created an assessment that helps us evaluate teams in order to be able to, like, make sure we're picking right or designing the right cohort. So, like, if we don't do that, then we don't get the returns. I remember if you asked us to do a hackathon, right? And you're like, hey, man, I see what you guys are doing with the 24-hour Innovation Bootcamp. Can you come run this hackathon? And if you say that we couldn't use the team model, right, as far as
Sure.
architects, creatives, and techies,
Sure.
I would say no.
Yeah.
We've turned away a $185,000 contract just for that.
Yeah.
Why? Well, we tested this team model in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. The first year, when people didn't identify as architects, creatives, and techies, and they created their teams based on their posses, their crews, and like who I wanted to go hang out with.
Right.
You had techies all in one area, and then you had business and marketing students all in another. There were 20 teams out of 100 people. There were 2 of the teams who only produced prototypes.
Jeez.
The year after that, when we implemented this was a type form survey, MVP of the ACT model assessment. There was just skill archetype. You have people identify as architect, creative, or techie, dominant, subdominant. And what ends up happening is that 16 out of the 20 teams produce prototypes. The year after that, 19 out of 20. The year after that, 20 out of 20. So to tell me, I'm just looking at the data.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's about getting people from idea to MVP.
Sure.
Or idea to prototype quickly. And so you have to trust
I love the fact that you're unwavering despite the dollar signs about this.
No, you can't. Look, I think I say this, who is this? I think maybe Barry Given said this. He said the pandemic is going to let you know who the wartime CEOs are.
That's good. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you're always bending with the wind, right, you'll break eventually.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't mean that you don't sway. It doesn't mean that you don't open up, right? It's like stay firm in what you believe.
Yeah.
Continuously test it. Continuously ask the questions to unseat the belief that you have, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's the aspect of even my faith. It's like, okay, well, I have this belief. I'm believing daily. My believing is also to test if the Christ that I say that Jesus is in my life, okay, is he actually that guy?
Sure,
right?
Sure, yeah.
And it's not, and it doesn't come from a standpoint of negativity or doubt or disbelief. It just only continuously sharpens and improves that which I do believe.
Sure.
And so whether that's in user experience, working with partners, trusting in the team design, we're just I'm looking daily.
Yeah.
Where's the gap? Where's the gap? How can we get 2% better? And
Yeah.
incrementally,
I love that.
Shift the dynamics here.
Yeah.
And it changes things, but those are things that you just have to do.
We kind of started this podcast with us talking about more of a personal life, kind of early characteristics that you've held on to all the way into Act House and the amazing stuff. I'm going to bring it back. One last question as we close here. Since talking to you, I've kind of gleaned from you're a very deep thinker.
A little bit.
Your thoughts have purpose, let's call it. I feel like, and I'm kind of leading into this question here.
Go for it.
I feel like there's a lot going on upstairs.
Okay.
Do you ever find that it's hard to quiet the mind? And what do you do in order to do that?
First question is no.
Okay.
Second question is because of what I do.
Okay.
I think when you start off recognizing that you have ideas and a lot of thoughts, the biggest question is okay, how do I process this stuff? For me, I think being exposed as a military brat to the tenets of discipline helped me understand that the principles of devotion, right? And there's a book that is there's this book called The Carpenter. I think John Gordon is the author. It's a storybook, but it's about this one carpenter who would take on clients, but while he was doing the work, he didn't pick up his phone, right? If you wanted to ask him about another job or solicit his services for your work, there was a time at the end of the day, he would go to this coffee shop or this deli restaurant or whatever, and he'll sit for 45 minutes.
And if you that is your moment.
That is your moment.
Oh, wow.
And there'll be in line to talk to him. And I was just like, man, you got to have some sauce for that, right?
Yeah, sure.
But what it taught me is that the biggest thing to focus on is the service that you're providing to others, right? So for me, in order to optimize that, I have to find a way to quiet the mind. So in 2014, started doing Sabbath rest. It's okay, well, if I have this belief that God created the universe in 6 days, rested in one.
Right.
Okay, well, if I'm made in his image, shouldn't I do the same thing? Like, so, okay, cool. Let's start resting.
Right.
So if you try to call me on sundown Friday about anything Act House related or anything related to my divine work,
yeah,
you'll probably get a stare. It's actually happened one time in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning. There was this founder who came up to me and just started, he said, "What's up, man?" I said, "What's up?" And then he starts diving in. And I looked at him and I was just like, "Man, that's great. Let's chat Sunday." Right? So I think that's one. Two, my morning and my night routine, man, it's just pillars of flow. It's like cave and evac. The night is evac, the morning is cave. If you're tinkering around with it long enough, you'll realize that cave is evac spelled backwards, or evac is cave spelled backwards, but it's also short for evacuation.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so going through those pillars of flow and being consistent to that allows me to just hey, the day's over.
Yeah.
Right? Or that aspect of it is over. It's okay.
Right.
Like, dust your hands. Let's hope that we can wake up.
Yeah.
For another one.
Right.
And get 2% better. Right. And then I think my strategic planning retreats, man, that I do. I started a lot of this work in 2014. I'm blessed to be able to do it for other companies. Blessed to be able to do it for our companies. Blessed to be able to do it for myself. And I just started developing the practice of planning out my new year in September, October, right? Going off for a day to just do a quarterly review. Okay, am I on track? Things like that. And being consistent at is key. And then I think my cave and evac will always put me in a perpetual state of reflection and journaling. And then you take the other times where you get ideas and you do this over time, like one day, the next day, the next day, the next day. So your speed to be able to tap into it is just
it gets faster and faster. Yeah.
It's so funny. I was out being very, very, very transparent. I said, "Chris, were you able to get questions?" My assistant. And she's like, "No." I said, "I really hope he's prepared for this interview." And the only reason why I thought that is because I team did a parody on me "Hey Siri, start a 5-minute timer." And I haven't worn my Apple Watch in
5 minutes, starting now.
That's hilarious.
There you go, right there. Yeah.
No, so interesting enough, I live in that Pomodoro technique.
Okay.
So I know what I can do in 20 minutes.
Sure.
And I'm like, all right, I'm losing 4 intervals.
Okay.
Of a 20-minute loop.
Okay.
Right? And I'm like, okay, all right, shut up, Dom. Just trust
Hopefully
the process.
Hopefully it's worth it.
Yeah. And it has been.
I get it.
But I think there's that aspect of, hey, I know what I can do in this container. So not looking at time as I'm working against it, but being able to see it as it's working for me.
Got it. Yeah.
It's just a construct that's needed in order to connect and collaborate with people. But if I actually move according to timing, then I'm really moving in my circadian rhythm. Sun up, sun down.
Sure.
Okay, cool. What's the flow? Get into your flow.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm rarely, I remember somebody actually tried to do this. I had a little gathering at my house. Somebody took it upon themselves to set the timer in my kitchen, in the microwave. They're like, "Don, why is it?" And they said, "Why is the timer off? Why isn't the clock on?" And this one person was like, I think the person who asked me the question was like, "I went ahead and just changed it for you." I said, "Stop." Revert back to where that was. Because I think oftentimes the more that you continue to look at time, you can't quiet your mind, right? You'll never get to a place of being able to manage it, whether it's family, kids, mom, dad.
Yeah.
Okay, you're getting older. Parents are getting older. How do I handle that? Right? So oftentimes if you just, sit still, just write out for 20 minutes, dude.
Yeah.
It's not, and you do that perpetually, you'll find yourself being able to process. I think those are the things that like helped me, not only as a human, but just as an entrepreneur, as a leader.
Sure.
Like when your team asks you for something, and like it should take sometimes 3-4 days for me. I'm like, that's not good enough. Right? So I can recognize the relationship shift. So, okay, cool. Well, there's communication that has to happen. There's also behavior that has to shift, right? So what do I do in order to assist them? What do they do in order to level set their expectation?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially if there's an ask and then there's 4 other asks. The reality is, can I actually get that done in one day? I don't know.
Right.
It's actually, I don't know if that's possible.
Right.
And is it big? Is it priority in the moment? Like, it can be. Does it move the needle? So just understanding, okay, you have to sift through those things. But I think it's the art of like quieting the mind.
Yeah.
But if you don't have any tools to engage with, man, I don't know how I would do it.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you right now, you're a better man than I.
Oh, get out.
The amount of discipline that I'm hearing from you, I'm like, man, I wish I had at least a little bit of that. I struggle with that.
I think you do. I think I say this, man, going back to language.
Sure.
How we talk to ourselves is probably one of the biggest influencers in our life that we don't pay attention to. Like the subconscious mind. What is it saying? And the question is, how are you curating it? So I remember I went on a journey of like not listening to music with words.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And I just, that whole year, no music with words. I said, what about my thoughts is so ugly or so scary or so, I don't know if I'm using these words because it's Halloween today or bullcrap, but, or spooky,
season,
right?
Yeah.
That I'm not comfortable with like just listening to me.
Yeah.
Self-talk, like what about me do I not like where, I can't listen to my thoughts. And I think, man, that journey, transformational. Got a chance to listen to myself more. Got a chance to understand my voice more. What's me, what's other people, right?
Influence, yeah.
Exactly. And so it's the subconscious mind that continues to just wear on us every day. And there's that timer has, hey, seriously,
5 minutes,
timer. Yeah. That alone, and then also you understand like how music just plays a vital role in how we experience life.
Sure.
And also how we codify life, how we share the experiences. But there's some songs that I remember I went to a smash room recently.
On purpose or like I got to get out my frustration?
It was a surprise. So this was last week actually.
Pick up a printer of like I got to do this.
Dude,
Office Space style.
I crushed a printer. I was crushing it last week. And then Friday hit and I'm not even regurgitating all the things that happened. But it was a lot of frustration.
Okay.
I was just like, nah, man, I've been rolling in my morning and night flows. Like but the thing is these things come only so that it can refine your practice, right? Everything, the thing that I'm most concerned about for the rest of my day, tomorrow and Saturday, is that I've now talked to you about all this stuff. And so now the lesson, the moment or the experience is coming around the corner where I now have to implement it.
Okay.
Because the test is coming.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So Friday, my assistant Crystal can just see that I'm not with it. And I usually crush it on Fridays. That's like Forecast Friday, Founder Friday.
Got it.
I even talk about day themes. I stole that from Jack Dorsey, but the concept of day theming. But anyways, she's like, "Come on, let's go." I was like, "Where are we going?" Yeah. And it's around like the 3:00 spot. So that's generally where I go to the coffee shop.
Sure.
Get my second boost for the day.
Got it.
Keep it moving.
Yep.
And so we pull up to this place. So we have to be there by 3:15. So we pull up to this place, and I'm like, is this a smash room? So the first time you've ever done anything like this? First time.
Okay.
Now, I was exposed to it by watching Billions.
Sure.
Right? And I think Taylor Mason, the character in the TV show, had went to a smash room.
Okay.
And I'll show how I tie this back around to music. So Kendrick Lamar's drops all year, which has pretty much been this battle against Drake.
Sure,
right?
sure.
That music has a lot of enriched emotions.
Okay.
Right? And in that room, that's what I went to. Right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So because I'm smashing things, I have this sledgehammer, I'm breaking up this printer, and I'm finding a lot of freaking joy, right? But I can't listen to. I'm not about to be thinking about hating somebody.
Sure.
Throughout my day, right?
Right.
So that music, sometimes the music is for the mood, but also if you just let it to just play in your subconscious, it can affect the mood.
Sure.
So the question is like, where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Right. So I think all those things to say, like, if you can quiet your mind and just be okay with, just try it for a day.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's crazy up there. Okay, cool. Now try it for 2 days. Okay, great. Hey, try it for 3. Okay,
Right.
Now try it in the 3rd time. Try to capture some of the thoughts. Okay, cool. Because the thing is this, man, like you experience so much in a day. If you don't take the time to have the reflection, you never get to the rest.
Yep.
You never get to the recovery, right? Of your mental, your spiritual, and your physical being.
Sure.
It just won't happen.
Yeah.
Right? You'll never get to the repentance of behavior of how you are as a leader. Right? You may see things that you need to shift and change.
Right.
But it's like, okay, well, man, I said I was going to do that 6 months ago. Or I said I'll stop doing that 8 months ago. Like, you can't beat yourself up if you never actually give yourself
Right.
a true shot at changing the behavior. So, I think I've changed my language from, like, the word discipline used to make me feel very militarized.
Okay.
So I started using devotion. Structure started to, like, what's the goal of structure? Well, I'm trying to get to flow. So I started saying pillars of flow. Like, these are my pillars. They facilitate flow, right? And it's the things that help you move from, like, instead of being a dam, being a river. Like, just perpetual. Like, don't worry about where the life source is coming from. Like, that's coming from above. You just keep going. And you just keep moving. So, yeah, man.
Dude, I think that's a great place to stop.
Let's do it.
Dude, you dropping some bombs on me, man. I appreciate it. Thank you
It's
for
been fun, man.
carving out some time today.
Absolutely.
It was great chatting with you, get to know you better.
Likewise.
Like I said, I've seen you kind of in passing, and I was like, man, this guy, he's deep. I gotta dive in here. There's a lot to digest here. So, man, we hit on, I'm sure, just the tip of the iceberg of what you're about, man. So I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks
and
for
chatting.
having me.
Yeah. Thanks,
Seriously.
man.